So yeah, we're really excited for the second day. We had a great end of the first day with a cocktail. We kicked off this morning with a very niche focus on asset allocation into private equity.
First of all, this event comes at a very opportune time because we're here talking about the future of finance, especially the role of alternative finance managers in the broader development of the continent.
And such, conference where people can meet, regulators, pension fund industry, service providers, actually, is helpful because we then get to sit together to discuss what are the challenges, what are the bottlenecks, how do we overcome them.
The continent requires a lot of investment, be it in infrastructure, be it in other emerging sectors.
Africa does not have the resources to do it, but the institutional investors in Africa have been able to start pooling resources that could provide some counter funding.
And here, long-term investments are being spoken about. So traditionally, banks have been playing their role. They provide credit, yes, but not on such long-term horizons.
We proved to the continent that one development financial institution is able to mobilize their own capital on the continent and be able to have an impact in the investments that we do, hence creating jobs and as well as grow our economies on the continent.
So what we need to do is to promote our own institutional investors, see how we can get more resources, extend use of financial services and products, mobilize some personal private capital, to support these developments in Africa.
When you talk about financing infrastructures, you're talking about really 10, 20, 30 years of financing requirements. And this is where pension funds and alternative fund managers have a critical role to play.
For me, the key is what asset class should be included in the portfolio construction. And what's great about conferences like this beautiful pension conference is that we are talking about new asset classes. We're sensitizing people to new ideas.
There are a lot of new products coming in terms of the alternative space, like private debt, but infrastructure remains an attractive point.
But this forum gives you a very good idea of what we are capable of, what's possible, and where we need to go.
We have also identified the fact that the financing gap in Africa on its own requires at least $150 billion in a particular year.
This is the continent where the population is expected to double. So clearly, in terms of infrastructure needs, we know they are huge.
I'm sure you've heard of the Lobito corridor that's coming up, where DRC, Angola and Zambia are working together to create rail transportation from DRC through Lobito up to Rwanda.
We cannot expect outside external funding to come into Africa and do the work for us.
Our role is to kind of help in narrowing that gap and by leveraging on the savings that Africa has.
Essentially, it's going to be executed and financed mostly through private market investment vehicles.
Before there were risk averse, there was always perceived risk versus the real risk on the continent. And I think we are seeing more pension funds coming not only to invest for alternative investment, coming out of the traditional investment, going into more long-term financing in the infrastructure space.
But we also have the opportunity to leapfrog. We do not have to build infrastructure as we did, 10, 20 years ago. We can now leverage new technologies when we are building. We can take into account ESG, the climate, angle, the sustainability, into it to make sure that we build something that is resilient.
Personally, I think the case for sustainability in Africa is more prevalent and more compelling than anywhere else.
We are at an advantage in that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we can jump onto what is already available.
And we need to make sure that we have very robust sustainability policies developed and implemented by our sovereigns.
And we are working strongly and adamantly on quantifying all the climate risk. And this is always informing our investment decisions.
The pension funds are here. They've created an association now of African Social Security Association for all pension funds in Africa. Where do you think they are going? They are looking at creating a long-term investment fund that now goes and meets infrastructure needs, more alternative energy, the possibilities are just immense.
The whole initiative is coming from institutional investors.
But it has to be considered in African context. And a lot of the pension funds in Africa are very much aware of the conditions and the society that they live in, and therefore they prioritize the economic development of their jurisdictions.
And so we're going to have to negotiate fit for purpose conditions and solutions as we access this for this funding.
There's need really to be a balance between the environment issues and also socio-economic development issues which benefit me and you, people who reside here in Africa.
We come in to bridge in the gap between where the private sector is able to see the risk and attain at the same time.
But the most important thing that there is a collective togetherness.
We've been part of this journey for quite some time. We've intervened in the private sector for quite a long time. We support governments, SMEs. We work very closely with the pension funds that we're here today. We work across with partners because partnership is a strategy of the bank for quite some time. And these challenges require innovation. And we're very proud to be one of the innovative DFIs on the continent.
With new technologies, the pension fund industry can actually significantly improve in terms of governance, investment management, decision-making process.
Because it's bringing more information to investors, and then when they have more information, they make better investment decisions. That's increasing efficiency. Then the capital is put in the right place.
One of the objectives of this continent is also to create one common market. So we cannot have one common market if we still have very fragmented regulations.
Once again, in Africa, we have the opportunity to make it work for us, and we have been making it work for us. If you look at the eastern part of Africa, fintech has been a big player.
So through new technologies, we can also, work toward creating that harmonization that we need.
Once you've got efficient systems in place, it's easier to manage, easier to monitor, and there's a greater appetite for support for those systems.
This current generation of Africa is very much in tune with technology, and I think that can only progress and advance.
Let's not walk the path others have walked. Let's just walk the principle they've walked, that's all.
We are beginning to see an agenda where it's all inclusive. We have had infrastructure development which is now cross-cutting across the continent.
Obviously, technology will also play a role, collaboration, aspects of regulatory reforms, because Africa is not just one country, it's multiple countries.
I think what I've seen and experienced at today's conference the last 2 days is that we all agree we need to collaborate, we need to cooperate, we need to share.
From the private sector, the public sector, policymakers speaking about how to get Africa going.
And more importantly, the regulators that were in the room were very critical. We're able to learn about policies that have been put in place for pension funds to be able to operate and be able to invest in the space we're in.
But predominantly, our focus is going to be advocating for the role of pension funds and how they can make an impact within the economic development of these African markets.
We are long-term investors, pension funds. If we bring that together, the Bank of Mauritius governor just said 700 billion assets under management by the pension funds on the continent. That's a lot of money. It can do good.
And therefore, I think it's really the opportune time for pension funds and alternative investment managers to start reflecting seriously about how Mauritius can really accompany them in their expansion and in their growth for the region, for the betterment of themselves and of our region.